Balance is such an important concept or principle that we can train and improve upon throughout our entire lives, right? So there's balance physically within our lives, and there's balance emotionally and psychologically and spiritually, right? So we're mostly covering the physical aspect, and the mind-body aspect in this kind of work that I'm doing here. In this lesson, we're going to begin to explore the hip joint, right, which is a ball and socket joint, right? And the hip joint being one of the more important joints in terms of our balance, right? The joint has a lot of nerves, which are referred to as proprioceptors, a very high density of these that help tell our bodies where we are in space, right? So they help with balance. Our ankles also have a high density of these nerves. Let's start just by standing with our feet about shoulder width apart, and notice how you're breathing. Notice the pressure of your feet on the floor. How does it differ right to left? Notice the position of your pelvis under your head. Right? Does your pelvis feel in front of the head? Does it feel like it's centered nicely under the head? You can be in any position actually and find balance. People have this notion that you have to have perfect alignment to have balance, but that's not really the case. Okay, bring your feet pretty wide apart. Let's say about 1.5 feet or 2 feet. Sometimes people will come into the clinic and I'll see them standing like this, so we would call that like a wide base of support. Yeah, and oftentimes they're doing this because it makes them feel they're more stable, right? But I'll demonstrate that they're not stable by pushing on their chest, right? And they'll quickly lose their balance going backwards. But the main issue is that they don't have the ability to react efficiently, right? So they're more likely going to fall. It's difficult to take a step back when your feet are so far apart, right? And that has to do with the fact that your hips are located much more centrally. So bring your feet so that they're a little closer together, right? Maybe somewhere between like 4 to 6 inches apart or so. And then you have a sense of your feet are now under your hips. Right? So imagine someone pushes you and just see what that feels like, right? You can adjust. Right? If someone pushes me in any direction, I would be able to respond. I may not necessarily hold my ground, right? If someone pushes me, I could turn, maybe that would help, but the important thing is I could make an adjustment. I could step without hesitation, right? And I'll maintain my balance that way. Bring your feet so that you're about shoulder width apart. Hands here to the crease of your hips. To find your crease, you might sit back as if you were going into a chair, right? You can feel there's the crease. You've got muscles, tendons, a lot of soft tissue on the surface between your hands and the actual joint, but you can feel that there's movement in that region. So kind of bring your fingers maybe like so and just sort of gently touch, maybe with the pads. Just touch that region. Not with force, just very gently just touch. You don't need to push into it. Sink your attention to the center of the hip, the center of the ball. And sink the ball down like it's really heavy, keeping your hips under your shoulders, no longer sitting back into a chair. Just going straight down. If you feel like your head is really tilted forward, just feel the back of your head floating back a little bit, and then your head just being ever so slightly suspended. Right? So as the head goes into a nicer position, you can allow the rest of your body to sink a little bit below the head. If you like, you can sink down quite a bit if you want to try to work your legs, but for this lesson, you could just as easily just sink an inch or two. And let's just start from there and shift your weight to the side. Right, a few times to one direction, go to the same direction, and just feel that you can initiate the movement from your hip joint. Feel the heaviness. Shift to the other side. Feel that the weight of your shoulders sinks into the hips, and the hips sink into the knees sink into the feet, and so forth. Imagine you're sitting on a bench, a smooth bench. Go side to side. So the hips feel heavy. Good. Stand up and take a little rest. Shake out the knees a little bit. Shake out the arms. Tap on your center a little bit. Notice your breathing. Again, slowly move your attention into your hip joint. You can put your hands on that crease. Sink into the hips slowly. Now I'm going to turn. I'm going to turn such that my hips remain under my shoulders. I'm just turning in a equal manner. And just do a little bit. Just do a little, just really feel what's going on in that initial movement. Just that little bit. If you go a lot, you start to feel resistance. You'll start to twist, and you don't necessarily catch everything that's happening within your structure. So in Feldenkrais, as well as Tai Chi, but really importantly in Feldenkrais, we want to understand what's happening with these little movements and how they're connected. Turn the other way. And if we exert too much effort, our body becomes tense in various regions, and then we can't sense the connections as well. Good. Nice, easy movement. If you want to go real slow, you can coordinate with breath. Exhale, then move. and return. And then assess, how did that feel? Exhale, then move, then return. How did that feel? Rest for a moment. Feldenkrais stated that awareness is the space between intention and action. As we practice the method, the awareness through movement lessons, we repeat movements many times. But each time we perform a movement, it's as if the movement is the first time we've ever done it. We might take enough time to imagine it in our minds before we move, right? So you see the movement occurring, you sense what it would feel like, and then you go. Intention followed by action. Then you rest and assess. How was that? Let's have another go at it, a different approximation. That's how you eventually start to develop this level of awareness, which you can then begin to bring into your daily life. Bring your attention into your hips. Visualize yourself sinking. Don't go yet. Visualize it. Feel it before you go. Sink your energy into your hips and then go. Now combine the movements. Sideways followed by rotation. Sideways with rotation. Pause. How was that? Now with the breath. Exhale. Sideways. Rotation. Exhale. Sideways. Rotation. Now with the mind, visualize hips, sideways, rotation, return, mind leads the chi, chi leads the body. And rest. I've had students tell me they can't practice during the week. Not even a minute. They're too busy raising kids, whatever. There's really no excuse not to practice if you understand the principles. You don't need to practice these forms. You don't need to do the awareness through movement lessons. You don't need to do the Tai Chi forms. But you do need to practice becoming conscious and taking moments to pause. Could be when you're brushing your teeth, right? It could be when you're wiping down the shower tiles. Could be when you're cooking or cleaning off the counter with a sponge. Here's a simple practice just to apply what we just did. Hips. Feel the hips. Sink into the hips. Now you're in the Tai Chi ready position. There's a bunch of grease and crumbs on the counter. I want to clean it, and I don't want to clean it like an unconscious automaton or a robot. I'm going to move from my hips, from my center. I'm going to go sideways and turn. Sideways and turn. So everything is connected. I'm just practicing becoming conscious and connected. Eventually, I can just move my arms. My arm feels connected to the rest of my body. I can move it in any direction. You can push on me any direction, and it feels like my arm is connected to the rest of my body. But I had to start from this more foundational principle of organizing myself in a way so that my external body moves harmoniously. My hips move with my shoulders. My knees move with my elbows. My feet move with my hands. Then I have to get my mind to integrate with my body movements. It's like one of my Feldenkrais instructors, we'll just wrap up with this, is a Zen master. He's been practicing for more than 40 or 50 years. And he taught us a method of meditation, which I don't do, but it's excellent. I've trained people to do it, and it's just simple. Ground, sound, breath. You take a moment in sitting or standing to check in with your sensation of what you feel, contacting the floor and the seat of the chair. Just noticing what you notice. Very simple. Then sound. I live in New York City, so there's sound all over the place. I live near LaGuardia Airport. Sometimes the planes take off every minute on the weekends. Luckily, I wake up early. You should have heard the planes at our wedding, right? We did that outside in the garden, and sometimes you would have to pause because the planes were flying overhead. Anyway, I get sidetracked. Ground. Sound is a vibration, right? We have sound within the room, the space that you're in. We have sound outside. And we have sound inside. When it's very quiet, you can hear your heart. You can hear your joints moving. Sound gives us a sense of spatial awareness. And breath, right? We've talked about breath. We'll talk about it more. If you take a moment to pause, as he recommends, and check in with your ground, sound, breath, you bring yourself into a more present state, which calms your nervous system, right? And that's what people need more than anything in today's world. So what he recommends to his students is 10 times a day, pause, and do ground sound breath for 30 seconds, right? And that equates to 5 minutes over the course of a day. And the students who say that's too much, he says you need to do it 20 times. So ask yourself, what are you doing when you watch these videos, whether it's me or other mindfulness videos or whatever it is? Ask yourself, are you doing enough away from the computer to truly practice being present and with yourself? It's very difficult to do when you're looking at a screen to be present. So take the time to explore this and see what you discover. The answers are already within yourself. The only thing that prevents a person from doing this sort of self-exploration is habit, right? So we over time we can develop habits where we become more conscious and train ourselves in a way like this. All right, so for here, we explored our hips. Just to wrap it up, rotation, sideways movement, sinking our weight into our hips, feeling the connections between the hips and the shoulders, moving on a horizontal plane, understanding how the width of your base of support influences your balance and your ability to move. We'll explore finding the hip joints more in the subsequent videos. We'll do it in different positions.